Hello, Professor. I'm Ben. Figured I would introduce myself since this is probably the closest I'll get to actually meet you in our class. Um, I've been sick for the past week, so if I'm not as brilliant and funny as I normally would be, then you must forgive me. So, on fair compensation, I was reading the compensation and the CEO in our packet, and I found it interesting that he mentioned that in 1980 the pay difference between the CEO and an average employee was 42 to 1, and 22 years later it was 282 to 1. I think this is something you pointed out in your videos as well. And as far as what would be fair compensation to me, I think that the lowest paid employee should earn some percent of what the CEO makes, or vice versa, where the CEO can only make a certain percent more than the lowest paid employee. And sure the exact percent's debatable. I have no idea, but as long as we can just talk with somebody about what that number is, I'll consider that a win for me, and we can argue over the minutia later. I think that the discrepancies between the two is just completely out of proportion with the work done. That sure, the CEO makes hard decisions and is on call more and has worse work-life balance, and they should be compensated for it. But I don't think it's on the order of 282 to 1. I think that's a little ridiculous. And lastly, I believe that paying the employee more would incentivize them to care more about their work and work harder. There's, of course, opposition for this, and the chief one that I can think of would be that capitalism drive in the U.S. Has always been there and is part of what has made us successful and made for some very successful businesses. And in the U.S., people equate success and wealth. Another way that someone could argue with this is innovation, like I said, and to expand on that a little further, you see a lot of innovations coming out of the U.S. You see a lot of medical innovations coming out of how just ludicrously profitable some medication and such is. So you do see a lot of innovation. I mean, it's true. And like you mentioned in your videos, that it is mentally tough and taxing. There's no doubt denying that. My first rebuttal against this, as it were, is half joking, but it's what I call the Democrat donut, where you have the middle class, the educated middle class tends to be a Democrat, and you see on the lower end of it, below that you'll see Republicans, and if once you get rich enough, you see people become Republicans again. And I've always liked to joke that I'm a good $20,000-$30,000 a year away from being a Republican. But I think the more serious side of that argument is that we see people acting against their best interest, and they vote against their best interest. And we saw that a little bit in my discussion board post I made about Wegmans and talking about the possibility of the CEO can only make a certain percent more than the lowest paid employee. And the opposition to that idea is remarkably fierce amongst the people that would benefit the most from it. It's a weird level of dissonance between them and what would benefit them. I don't understand it. I really don't. I believe that there's three basic needs that everybody should meet. Everybody should be able to meet if they're working 40 hours a week in a minimum wage job, in any job. I think everyone should have food and water, shelter, and health care. And that if you're making minimum wage, whatever that is, you should be able to cover these things. And if not, social support should step in and say, okay, you should probably be able to go to the doctor, um, or you should probably be able to afford a place to live. And we're seeing that that's not true, that people are working 40 hours a week and you can't afford a car, a house, education. You can't and take care of a family, even two people making minimum wage. You really can't afford that. And I don't think that's right. I think you should talk about the virtue ethics and being able to flourish. You should be able to flourish and be a decent person and be able to meet these needs with minimum wage. And I think there's a middle ground to be found between the 282 to 1 and everyone's making the same amount. And I do agree that there's some innovation that comes from making a lot of money or the prospect of being able to make more money. But I think someone can have someone can make enough to where they have a nicer car than me, but I should still be able to afford basic needs. Anybody should be able to afford that. So I think there's some middle ground to be found. And the last argument that I would have against this is that that when you're in a position to where you could make decisions that talking about a CEO can make decisions that affect the entire company, and that can affect themselves, then they're going to do that. That it's going to incentivize the short-term over long-term growth in value. And I don't think you get that with the current compensation. So on the CEO and the board, the board is less involved with the day-to-day business now, which means that they're going to be less knowledgeable, and as a result, they're going to have reduced ability to make an informed decision. And as you pointed out in your video, the CEO has no boss, and since the board has reduced the ability to make informed decision, they're not going to be able to judge whether or not something comes across the desk is in the best interest of the company or the CEO, and then that's when you come to this rubber stamping issue and of a CEO saying, I should make more, therefore I should make more. And while the CEOs are not ethically or legally responsible, they're making the decisions, and the board, being uninformed and rubber stamping policy, are personally and legally responsible. And on change, do I think there should be change? Absolutely, there should be change. The board should be more informed. And I think that if I can go to jail for stealing, that if anybody steals, they should go to jail. There should be some sort of government oversight. There should be some sort of change in the judicial system where you can prosecute people. And I think the difference between me stealing a penny and a CEO stealing $1 million for art or whatever, I don't think there's a difference. I think the penny and the $1 million is just a matter of degree, and then the underlying of the underlying sin, I guess, as it were, is the same regardless. And Of course, there's opposition to this. The one that I could think of is that the board is unable to be as informed as they were before, and they can't be as involved as the CEO, and they're not going to know as much. So they need to be able to trust the CEO. But my response to that is, I don't care who it is, but I believe that somebody should serve as a check and balance to the system. That if someone is making decisions that affect them, they're going to make decisions that would benefit them, and there should be some measure, some way to prevent this. And another way that someone can argue my stance is that in an ideal market would self-regulate, and I would respond by saying yes, in an ideal market, sure, but when we look at the aforementioned pay discrepancy, the pay gap between the CEO and the average employee, we're seeing it. We're not seeing it self-regulate. It's just not happening, and what we're seeing uh, is that we're running into a plutocracy where the rich are passing on their corporations. Are able to, through lobbying, they're able uh, to push laws and ensure that the companies or country it keeps going in the direction that benefits them. Third, we have the relationship between CEO and values, diversity, and decision making. And I guess the first thing is, how does this occur? And as you mentioned in your video, one of your videos, is that they're able to influence the decision making and a lot of this stuff because by choosing where these conversations take place. In other words, if they decide that power decisions that involve the corporation and its trajectory are going to happen in a locker room, literally, then they're deciding that the powerful decisions in the company can only be made by somebody that has a penis. And is that right? Probably not. And another way that they're able to drive the values is because they have a highly public position. People are going to try to emulate what they see as successful. And if they want power, then they're going to try to emulate that. And if they see the CEO is Jeff Bezos and they're vying for some of his scraps of power, they're going to try to be more like Jeff Bezos. And is that a good thing? Probably not, in the grand scheme of things. Then you ask, what effect should employees make, or what effort should employees make, if any? I'm not sure I fully understand the question here, but I think you're asking what role does should employees have between CEOs and values or companies. But I think that when a company invests in the person, that the person cares. Therefore, work is better. I think that the responsibility of the employee and also the consumer is to in turn invest into good companies and to encourage good companies to be good companies. And one example is I have a Walmart 30 seconds away from me and have a Wegmans 20 minutes away from me. And I do my shopping at Wegmans for a couple of reasons. The first is that it is not stressful, and The second is I believe in what they do, and I can spend the same amount of money, more or less, and put my money where my morals are. And I think by the consumer and employees investing in companies that invest in them, then we're going to see better companies to work for. The biggest issue that CEOs face, for me, I think it comes down to what they're responsible for. At the end of the day, your biggest issue is what you're responsible for. I think that a CEO, their biggest issue is that in guiding business to meet the needs of the stakeholder while still driving the business to the goals of the stockholder. And I stress both stakeholder and stockholder because I think the stakeholder is extremely important, and that by investing in companies like Wegmans, you are helping to spread happiness around. To get on the utilitarian and the virtue ethics discussion on it, you're spreading happiness around, and you're spreading the ability to flourish around. When I see people in Walmart versus Wegmans, do I see people that are happy, that are flourishing? No. When I go into Wegmans and I see people that are just genuinely care about doing a good job and making me, the customer, happy, then I see people that do want to continue to foster environments such as where they work. And so I think it benefits everybody. I think it benefits the company more, I don't know, but it benefits the employees more, absolutely. The community more, absolutely. So I guess if there is a finite amount of happiness in the world, which I don't necessarily agree with, but if there was, yeah, we should spread it around a little bit better than 282 to 1. The biggest opposing view that I can think of is a good one. I really have no rebuttal for it. Is that the role of business is not social equality? It's not. It's really not. But left unfettered, corporations are going to do things like coal mines, children in coal mines, and I think somebody should probably not let that happen, whether it's the business or corporations themselves or the market or outspoken groups. I don't care who, but somebody should be driving the change. Somebody should be ensuring that people are able to meet their basic needs. And right now, I'm not seeing it done by the government or corporations. So that's it. Just I don't care who's responsible. I think we should just pick one. All right, I ran over the 50 minutes a little bit, but I apologize for that, and have a good day.